Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Tales of Recovery. Today we have the beautiful Xochitl Ashe, a fifth-generation plant medicine woman who leads mushroom retreats in Mexico and works at an Indigenous woman-owned center and ancestral healing and so much more. And thank you so much, Xochitl, for being willing to come and share your wisdom and your love with us here in Tales of Recovery.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Grace, for reaching out.
Oh, no, this is so exciting. I would love to start if you could just tell us kind of how. I mean, I read on your webpage that you were initiated at 16 years old, and I have a lot of clients that bring me their teenagers to work in recovery and to help them, and I see so the need. And when I read that, I thought, no, I need to talk to Xochitl because us women, we're getting. I think there's a lot of us seeking healing and seeking recovery and seeking a more of a wholeness and integrated life, earth-based life. But the teenagers. So anyway, that being said, we can talk about that as well. But if you would like to just let us know kind of where you're from, where you're situated, and how you got into this beautiful work that you're doing.
Yeah, of course. Well, my journey really began at birth. I was born into a family, so I'm the fifth generation of a family of what we would call like curanderos from Peru. And while they were all male, who would work with the public, I have to say that, even though they were all curanderos, my grandma was incredible with herbs. And I emphasize that I am the first female of the lineage because even though there were other females in my lineage, they weren't recognized. And I think that happens a lot in Latin America, that there's a lot of medicine women that aren't recognized because they're not out and dealing with the public, but they know all the hierbas and all the different rituals and ceremonies, but they're using them for their families and their little community. So it was important for me to emphasize that, I am fifth generation, but I am the first woman because it's important nowadays to really be open about being a carrier of this wisdom, especially because for so long, my family wasn't open. It was dangerous. Nowadays, it's like we have those what we call the Instagram shamans, those folks that like just decide to call themselves shaman because they've been in Peru for 2 weeks or something like that, getting the training. But yeah, this was really serious work, and it's actually work that I didn't really feel that I wanted to do, and I was very blessed that even though I was initiated at 16, I had the freedom. My father grew up in a very interesting time, right? Like during the hippie movement. And he was a complete and total hippie. So, he had his indigenous traditions, but then had great respect for Eastern traditions. So I grew up kind of a hybrid, like meditating, and, we had like a picture of Krishna, right? And then Pachamama. But I was also really blessed that at 1.5, my father decided to move us to Mexico. And so even though I was, my roots are in Peru, my ancestral roots, Mexico is also a huge part of who I am, because I grew up there. And after my initiation at 16, since you asked, that a lot of people are interested in guiding their children towards, doing this kind of plant medicine, specifically fungi mushroom work. For me, when I had my initiation at 16, it really was so impactful that, at that time I was in San Francisco because my parents had gotten divorced, and all of my friends were doing all different kinds of drugs. I mean, it was, you could get anything. And I remember after my initiation just being really clear that like I didn't want to drink. I just didn't want to do anything like any other drug. I was so in touch with my spirit and the spirit of nature that it was so clear how that was dragging me down. And so after that, I didn't drink alcohol, and I never really actually had a problem with alcohol until I was 23. And it was later on that, I decided to not drink alcohol at all because of my work. But yeah, this medicine was, if we're talking about recovery, was really powerful in that it gave me so much clarity at that age that it allowed me to make decisions that were from a place of really looking out for myself, and trusting that I'm being looked out from something bigger than myself, like a deep, deep connection to nature, um, animals, plants. And I think being 16, that really shifted my life in a significant way. Um, but like I said, I had the freedom. I was never pushed into this role of medicine person. It was kind of part of our lifestyle. And it wasn't until I was 19 that my dad's best friend, who is a Mazatec medicine man. So, for the audience, the Mazatec people are the people from the mountains of Oaxaca, and they are the last living indigenous community that has held the guardianship or the knowledge of ceremonial use of Teonanacatl, the sacred mushroom. And so at 19, we did a family ceremony because these ceremonies are done with your family. So, I was in ceremony with my father and my grandmother and my grandfather and my aunt. And I loved this medicine. It was really, I felt it was really gentle to me. And my godfather, he right away saw that I had a spiritual connection, like an allyship with this medicine. And then he wanted me to start learning with him. And and I was like, hold on, I'm only 19. Like, but, there was never, I was just really lucky. There was never any pressure, that I needed to be like a medicine woman and follow these traditions. So because there was no pressure, I was able to live a really full life. I went to an arts high school in San Francisco, and then did some college in San Francisco, and then LA. And I was able to really do a lot of traveling and getting to know myself. And as also like as an artist, um, I loved theater, and like there was a point in my life around 26 when I realized like that my love of theater was actually because I couldn't sit in a classroom um, learning psychology, but I had such a deep interest about the human condition that like learning theater and acting and understanding like what motivates a human to be a certain way. Like that was how I learned psychology. That was like the beginning of my training in psychology. And after that, I was like, I was like hungry for anything that was personal development. And being in Los Angeles at that age, like I attended so many different workshops, um, and really got to see the Western approach to, I would say, healing and the development of being. And from there, I started doing. I was always really good at business. I started doing business coaching. I started being a coach, and it was so much fun for me. But I realized that every time I would have a client, it was always the same thing, which was that if they were having huge issues in their business, it was a disconnect with their spirit. And so that's when I decided to kind of come out of the closet as a medicine woman. And I was like, you know what?
Right.
Like this might not be super popular, But like I have indigenous traditions, and they could be applied towards folks that are in the realm of entrepreneurship. And so that's when I would take my clients, and I would maybe take 4 or 5 clients, and I would bring them to Mexico, and we would do ceremonies. At that time, we had to be really just like underground. I would never talk about it. I'm really careful, especially as a person of color, to follow the law. I have a
Yeah.
legal business. I am right now I am a founder of the only Indigenous woman-owned psilocybin retreat center in the world. And
Right
so,
on.
I have to play by the rules, and that's why we do ceremonies in Mexico. Because in Mexico, while there's still some, gray areas with psilocybin, as a Indigenous medicine carrier of a tradition, you are allowed to um,
So,
administer the medicine. So, yeah, that's, a little bit of my journey, of how I got here. And it was just a huge commitment to my own growth, and also people's, you know, uh, like people's embodiment of their fullness. I think that that's my love language. That's my passion. And just realizing that, a lot of people in the West, we're so disconnected in ways that we don't even know, that we don't even like can acknowledge, like our disconnection to nature,
yeah.
that like has made us so sick, whether physically sick or emotionally troubled. Um, and this medicine helps you so much to not just reconnect to yourself, but reconnect to the natural world, to this being. In Mexico, we call her Tonatzin, right? The Earth Mother, to this being that, like, if you knew that there's something that is so sacred, so divine, so powerful, that is always looking out for you. But not only that, but like you are part of her. Like life is different. Life is different. And it's different in a really positive way. Um, I could see that in my life, and I can see the huge shifts in clients who have had these experiences.
Yeah, it's so I'd like to talk a little. I just get so emotional about this specific topic because I do think we can only heal if we return to Earth and remember what you just specifically said, that we are made of Mother Earth. We are same elements, same type of, so to be held by her, by Tonatsin. But I, for example, like many people that listen to this podcast, grew up in Mexico or even the United States under a religious rule of, Christianity or whatever the rule was in your religion. Definitely, at least, and I can speak for myself, even though, I'm 50% from Sonora, I'm sure I have Yaqui blood in me, I've double checked. My family was like, no, no, no. Nosotros somos de Europa. We're European and we're not going to talk about it. And I always felt like this conflict growing up, like, but why? This is so much cooler. It makes so much more sense. I feel so much better outdoors than in this church building with these people talking about what the heck are they talking about. So this internal programming, because I think a lot of us might be beyond like, I don't really believe that, but just in case, right? So this internal programming that I think is, part of this colonialism. um, if you could talk a little bit about how you work with your clients to release that and to understand that, because I mean, clearly, if I'd had a dad that was taking me to ceremony at 16, 19 years old, it would have been great. And I'm trying to do that now with my kids. But how would you maybe talk a little bit about that? Like, how does that process work, or how can we soften into that truth without feeling like we're betraying our grandmothers, great grandmothers who didn't know it any better, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Well, I think that the first step is realizing that, um, ancestral trauma does exist, right? Like it is real, meaning that your and mine ancestors have gone through some experiences that we are very much blessed not to completely go through them again, right? But these experiences weren't just personal experiences in their life, but they were also an experience that they had because of the community that was around them, the society that was around them, the racism, the patriarchy, the colonialism, right? And so
Right.
if you ignore that as part of your own healing and also your own, like getting to know yourself, then what ends up happening is that you do a lot of work. You know, um, I've been very fortunate that because of, the work that I do, I get a lot of clients that are I would say, very seasoned on their spiritual or personal development path. They've done a lot of therapy, they've done a lot of workshops, they've done other plant ceremonies. Like they are people that are so committed, and they want to now study under me, and because they're like, I'm ready for something that helps me connect to something even deeper than what I've explored. And the reason that they do that is because what they have been doing, even though it's improved their lives significantly, they're finding that there's a few things that just keep repeating. Meaning, you use the word like conditioning or patterns, blocks. And no matter how much therapy they do, no matter, like I went to this workshop and like still here I am once again dating that very, very toxic, abusive person, for example. Or here I am once again, like my bank account is empty and I'm, struggling with money. Or here I am, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have seen, like in ceremony, and then it's been proven also, now there's so much conversation about it in science, that if your family was traumatized in some way, right? And I'm talking about like your, not just your parents, because in therapy we usually look at parents, right? Like how have your parents influenced you and what you have to heal. But now we're looking at like grandparents and great 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 grandparents, and this is called epigenetics, right? Like how, like these traumas actually affect your genes. And
Right.
so you could be walking in this world and be like, okay, yeah, I'm doing great, and then all of a sudden that problem just keeps repeating. And what we have found is that usually the source of the problem isn't necessarily in you or your parents necessarily, but it's like generations back. And so when we talk about generations back, we have to consider what happened in history. Like you cannot deny that we, especially as people of color, have suffered through slavery, colonialism, patriarchy. All right. Like these are deep wounds that we are still healing from. And living in two worlds like you and I, because we're either working in Mexico and then also the US. Like
Right.
we can see how in the US, folks are actually becoming more aware about the effects of colonialism in their lives. But in Mexico, man, it's like religion is so strong. And not only is it strong in that, people are going to church and like calling themselves Catholic, but they consider being Catholic as a part of their identity. And it's a part of their identity they are not willing to release. And so when you have this, it's very hard to actually do the work of decolonization. Because why would you want to take a part of like something that you consider like this is my tradition, right? So you're not, it's very hard to question those things. I mean, I get a lot of, I get in other interviews, people ask me like, oh, in Mexico, like, are you getting a lot of Mexicanos that are wanting to do this work? And I say like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of Mexicanos that are becoming aware and getting back into their indigenous culture and traditions and roots. But in the majority here in Mexico, that's not it. Like, that's not happening. I just, it was the Alborada here in San Miguel de Allende where we're based. And we just finished like a whole month of, it's like Mexican independence, and there's all these like street parades, and like everything includes the church. Everything is so seeped in. Even like the indigenous dances, like they're carrying saints. And there's definitely a clear explanation for that, because at least here in Mexico and also Peru, when we practiced our indigenous traditions, the only way that we could practice them, it would be like if it aligned with a date of a certain saint. So that's how we were able to not get killed and survive. But after 3 generations, people forget these things. And so we think that, oh, my grandparents, they were holding up this saint during this parade. But the truth was, it's like, no, actually 3 generations back, they were putting like a statue of, some indigenous deity behind the saint, and they were parading the statue around, hidden.
Undercover.
Yeah, undercover. And you think like you forgot that it was undercover.
Yeah.
And now you're like, no, that's tradition. I'm gonna hold this saint every year. And it's like you totally forgot that this was actually a way of survival. And so now you won't even question it, because their history is erased, right? History is like written by the winners. Yeah, we can get deep into this. But what I would have to say is, number one is like, if you really want to know self, right? And in colonialism doesn't just affect people of color, it also affects our European brothers and sisters, because trauma isn't just felt by the victims of it, it's also felt by the perpetrators, right? And so it's really our job and our responsibility to heal from colonization as a community, not just as, like I said, as people of color, but all of us. Like, there's so many things that we don't even question in our lives that are operating under colonialism, and we have like no clue about them. um, yeah, I can give you one example. um,
Sure.
so one of the things that I see here in Mexico is like people don't take care of their animals, their like dogs, very well. They'll put them on the rooftops, and there's this attitude towards animals that like animals are like they're here to just serve us. Like, instead of getting an alarm for my house, I'm going to put my dog on the rooftop, never walk him, never take care of him, right? Like, so I was really contemplating, like, because I'm such a lover of all animals, and animal rights. And I was just like, why? Like, why is it my people? This happens in Peru too, right? Like, what is going on with my people that, like, we're not taking care of animals, and like so much abuse? People like here, they get little puppies, and then they like, we were driving on the highway, and you see all these dogs on the highway, and it's people just leave them there. Like, after they get tired of them, eh. And so I was reading the other day that the colonial mindset is really about hierarchy and putting humans at the top of the food chain and animals at the bottom. And so when you have this colonialistic mindset, you're not going to see animals as our brothers and sisters, which earth-based traditions and spirituality, we always see animals as like they are even our guides. They are our brothers and sisters. You know, we call them like our relatives. They hold so much spiritual power, and they're our allies. But if you are under colonialism, like you don't even know, and the way that you treat animals is horrible, because
Yeah.
you have this mindset that they're here to serve you. And so if you look at that, you can see it. I mean, not just in Mexico, then we can look at it in the rest of the world with the meat industry and how horrible animals are treated for massive food consumption, right? So these are just like ways that we don't even think about that we're colonized.
Yeah, I think, you're born into it and you don't even, unless you begin to study or begin to seek a different way of connecting to yourself. But thank you for saying that. I appreciate it because, um, yeah, it's so, especially when you mentioned about how the Catholic is, well, this is just part of my culture, this is just part of who I am, and you feel like you're being a traitor. So it's great context to see that no, you're not being a traitor. You're actually remembering that there's something kind of off with this, because a lot of things I see and I ask is, how is that working for you? How is continuing down this line? How is it working for you? Everyone's still getting drunk. Everyone's still, consuming, getting into debt. Everyone's still, not taking care of their bodies, or even like you mentioned, maybe their animals. So I appreciate you saying that. But yes, that's a whole other rabbit trail. Let's bring it back to ceremony and how, um, maybe you can tell us about how you've seen that these ceremonies with these plant allies bring you back into remembering more of your essence, and maybe allow that, um, that colonialism to begin to dissipate, to heal ancestrally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I want to make something very clear. It's no matter where you come from, right? No matter what tradition or religion you currently are a part of, at some point, like if we look far enough, all of our ancestors, all of our ancestors had a divine connection to the earth, a
Right.
spiritual connection to the earth. And so this is really what was lost. I mean, and I'm being kind by saying lost, but really what was killed, what was oppressed, through really vicious and destructive violence towards Indigenous people and women.
Yeah.
So part of our recovery, I'm actually in the process of writing like a recovery from the colonization. I mean,
Nice.
colonialism, like how we can recover from it, right? Like it's a 12-step program.
Yeah.
Um,
That's great.
yeah.
I'm signing up.
um, Part of that is just like number one, like acknowledging that no matter where you come from, like, wow, however I look at it, I have a lineage. I come from a lineage that is connected to the earth in a spiritual way, in a divine way. So that's the first one. The second one is that, these plant medicines, these plant allies, they're here for everyone, right? So this is not a conversation of like, no, 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 only Indigenous people can take these medicines. But this is a conversation that we need to honor, that because of colonialism, these medicines had to be hidden. And the carriers, the wisdom keepers of these medicines had to stay hidden. And the reason why we have them today is because many of them risked their lives. The first thing when a country, a town, a community was being colonized, the first thing that would be targeted were any medicines people that were practicing with these plants, right? And so it's important to acknowledge this when we are participating, when we want to connect to these medicines. Like, yes, they're here for everyone, but we cannot be ignoring that these medicines were kept by indigenous people so we could enjoy them today, right? And I think that that's problematic in what's happening today with the psychedelic ecosystem. I don't like to call it industry, right? Is that right now we have a lot of science that's coming out, and there's a lot of interest, financial interest, and this is mainly led by white men. And so what we're seeing is retreat centers popping up all over Latin America, Costa Rica, Peru, that are being owned by white people. And maybe, I've even seen, like, they don't even hire indigenous people to serve the medicine. Maybe they do hire some indigenous people to serve the medicine, but we really have to look at this in a bigger way. Like, yes, thank you for hiring indigenous people, but actually, what if you could collaborate with an indigenous person,
right,
and support an indigenous person building their own retreat center, right? Like, there's still a colonialistic mindset, even in the approach to these medicines. Like, we have young people going to Peru, Ecuador, at the Amazons and doing ayahuasca, and they get so excited about the journey they taken, and then all of a sudden they decide, no, I want to administer ayahuasca. And it's like, okay, great, but it took me 25 years to be with this medicine to get to where I am. I really tell people, like, don't go to medicine people who haven't taken the time. Like, try to go to medicine people who at least have had a training. If they're not indigenous, have at least been trained and have been practicing with these medicines for at least 25% of their lifetime. You would not go to get heart surgery from somebody that took a 2-week certification or even a year. I wouldn't.
That's
and
right.
and these ceremonies, they're spiritual surgery. So we need to be really mindful and also really heartful in including indigenous people in the conversation about how this is going to go. Right now, it's just a matter of time. Legalization with psilocybin is happening in Oregon. We're actually our retreat center is having a group come as part of their experience to get trained as psychedelic facilitators. So, because they're going to be able to facilitate in Oregon. So things are rapidly changing, and we need to make sure that indigenous people are contributing to how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And also, like, what is, because you have listeners, right, from Mexico, like, what is it to be indigenous, right? I think that's a really important question, like, because a lot of indigenous people in Mexico have, like, they don't even call themselves indigenous anymore. Like you were saying, your family was like, no, somos de Europa.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like, Gris, you have to be like, I am proud, to be Yaqui. Like, we need to
That's
start
right.
representing and being able to trace, like, pero de dónde era tu familia? Where was your family from? And, like, claim it because it is important to give a voice. We are still here. These are ancient teachings, but, like, indigenous people are still here. We are still here. This is evolving with us, and we need to be present for it. This is one of the most important things since the .com era. This is the psychedelic movement, I believe, is one of the most important things since the internet.
Yes.
Like the internet completely shifted the future of humanity in such significant ways. Like the world would never be the same after the internet. And it's exactly similar, you know, the mushrooms that, you know, like they cover the earth. They are a mycelium network, just like the internet, that connect us all. And so this is, you know, the internet was about technology and connection,
Right.
right? The at least I can talk about, you know, my ally, which is the mushrooms. Mushrooms are all about connection
Connection.
and inner technology.
Whew. That's so good. And it's so true. Okay, so one thing, thank you for saying that about really looking into your indigenous roots, mis mexicanas, and two things, you know, noticing if you feel like, oh no, yeah, I don't want to be indigenous, where does that come from? Or if you really want to embrace it and speak it out loud like I do, yes, you know, where's that, you know, where's that coming from as well? Like open heart, proud, and honoring, and more of an earth-based um, connection, which in the end is really all we have, I think, at least for me. And then thank you for saying that. And the second part is, can you talk a little bit more about those who haven't really had an experience with psychedelics or with the mushroom, with your ally, my ally? How does
Mhm.
that work? Like, what does that do in your brain? What does that do to your heart? What do you mean about all this connection? Somebody might be
Yeah.
listening on here knowing que estar hablando. Yeah.
It's so funny because somebody just told me that the number one topic at dinner parties in the US is microdosing with psilocybin. So, oh, well, there's a lot of science, right? So a lot of science is finally coming out about the benefits of this beautiful medicine. Um, Number one, it has the power to rewire um, your neural pathways. And so when we talk about recovery, meaning like, you know, people who have suffered from addictions, and really all of us, I think at this point, as folks who have are descendants, right, of other folks, of other, you know, grandparents, great 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 grandparents who have been colonized or enslaved or have, you know, just being a woman, right,
Yeah.
in this, I mean, in this time, which I thought we were going to be way far ahead, but you know, we've had some setbacks lately.
Mm.
Um, there are some addictions, definitely. And, you know, what are addictions? Like physically, there are these neural pathways in your brain that just like, even if you want to go right, like these neural pathways are like, nope, we're going to go left, right? And so it goes almost beyond, like there's a point where these pathways, because it's been a habit like for so long, like even when you want to shift them, it's hard, right? So it's been proven that this medicine, that mushrooms, give you plasticity, brain plasticity, which allow you
Mm.
to shift your neural pathways. So if you can shift your neural pathways within a ceremony, that gives you the opportunity to break long life habits. And so how powerful is that, right? Like if you had a habit of, you know, consuming substances, or if you've had a habit of getting into horrible relationships because of codependency, et cetera, it's a lot easier to be able to shift these habits that haven't been serving you
Right.
through the use of, I would say, ceremonial or therapeutic use of this medicine, right?
Yeah.
I do not advise you to do a big ceremony, like a big dose ceremony alone. You know, if that's something that is of interest to, you know, the listeners, I would say start with a microdose and then come to Mexico to do a ceremony with me,
Yeah.
right? So that's one of the ways, like scientifically. that already there's been so many studies of how it has helped improve the life of many people, especially people with deep depression, clinical depression, even anxiety. It's also spiritual medicine. It's what I call spirit medicine. It's medicine para tu espíritu.
Right.
And what this means is that, you know, I specialize, like one of the things that I decided to specialize because I was seeing it over and over and over in our ceremonies was ancestral, the healing of ancestral and generational trauma. And so sometimes folks want to heal from their ancestral trauma, right? But it's like you've lost like all the information about like who was your great grandfather, especially if we're immigrants. You know, it's really hard sometimes to trace. Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe I was from Puebla, but like via Oaxaca, you know, like maybe. And we have no idea. I mean, I've been doing so much research on my family lineage, but even then, like, se olvidan. People forget, you know, their history. And so, because this is spirit medicine, you know, we believe that your soul is always with you. Your soul is with you. Yeah, you know, when you're in your mama's belly, and your soul heard everything that your mom was talking about, was experiencing, right? Your soul knew what you were up to when you were 3. You know, your soul never left you. Like, that's a part of you, right? And so, and your soul is so ancient that your soul also knew your great 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 grandmother. And so what we see in ceremony is like when people are like, yo no conozco a mi abuelita, nunca la conocí, dicen que era buena onda, who knows, right? Like, I don't know my grandmother. I have no recollection, or there's no history about her. But then in ceremony, your grandmother shows up, you know, and she's like, hey, you know, you have not been able to buy a home, even though you've saved for the past 10 years and you keep, you know, car crash. Now I have to pay for the doctor's bill. And then the next year, you know, like your son gets sick, and like, why can't I buy a home? Right. And so your grandma shows up and is like in ceremony, and she's like, well, I want you to see, like, let me show you, right? Because this medicine allows you to see. It's, I call it, it's a vision enhancement. And you know, your grandmother shows up and she's like, I want you to see that, you know, our land was taken away from us. And so we had nothing, and then we had to immigrate. And so you need to heal that. You need to heal the wound of loss of home. And once you heal that, let's heal it now. And so we're there, you know, doing our work. And I'm like, vamos, okay, let's heal the loss of home. You know, let's heal that wound. What does that mean? You know, let's make peace with what happened. And then, you know, and you do that work in ceremony because it's spirit medicine and allows you to, you know, like see and hear your grandmother who you've never met, and allows you to like understand that there was something that happened that like deeply affected you. And then you leave the ceremony and you know, you email me or call me, you're like, oh my God, you know, it's true. I like did more research, and yes, we lost our land. And then, you know, a year later, you're able to buy a house with no problem. You know, and so this lives in the realm of magic, right? Like, is this something that, like, you know, can we test this? Can we do like a psychological research paper about it? Can we study it at Harvard, you know, School of Divinity, or you know, of School of, you know, psychological studies? No, like that lives in the realm of spirit. So that's why I say, like, yes, we can talk about the science, but we also need to talk about that this is medicina del espíritu.
Yeah. I have a friend who lives in San Jose del Pacifico. He is from San Jose del Pacifico. And we were over there visiting, I don't know, I think about a year ago, a few months ago. And I told him, so tell me a little bit about, because him and his wife they do ceremonies. And I mean, he was, mushroom ceremony since he was 10 years old. And his father, they're just, ahí son, ¿no? De San Jose. And he told me something. He's like, over there in those Uniteds, they talk a lot about, the science behind it and the psychedelic. It's more psychedelic, is what he said, which is great. He's like, but it's very mystical medicine because it takes you into other dimensions and it's very deeply spiritual. And that's exactly what you just said. I mean, I think it's so important to bring in the magic. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's not going to be tested. No? You either play or you don't. You're lost. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where can we? I know you're having this retreat at the end of the year. Can you tell us a little about that? See if some of us want to go sign up. How do we do that?
Yeah, wonderful. So we have a retreat starting December 27th to January 2nd. It's our New Year's retreat. But if you can't make it to that, we do have retreats throughout the year. And you can find us at Magical Medicine Journeys. And, it's a process to come and journey with us because we really take this with great honor and it's a serious thing. So you have to apply to come and journey with us. We want to make sure that this is good medicine for you and that, this is going to be really powerful for you. So yeah, just come to our website and I'm sure you're going to post it somewhere, hopefully.
Yes, all
and
of
they
it.
can access it.
Website, Instagram, webpage, all of it.
Yeah. But imagine starting the new year, right? Like you're in ceremony during the new year. How powerful is that?
Yeah. I know. Can people come, for example, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm bringing the kids. Can people come with their kids, with your family? I mean, kids, my kids are 20 and 19.
Yeah. So as long as you're, is it 21 and over?
Oh, okay.
You can bring your children. We've had a lot of families come. We have a lot of couples come. We actually give priority to families and couples because we know that this experience, when you bring somebody that's actually part of your life and also very much part of like your wounding, when you heal together, it's just so incredible what is available for you. So yes, people can come. We've had moms come at first by themselves and just like see the power of this. And then they came back, right, with their daughter. We've had like moms bring their sons. We really love having families. In terms of bringing smaller children, just because it's a legal retreat at this moment, we can't have that. But we'll see how everything starts evolving.
Yeah. I like how it's kind of come back to how you started with your family, right? And your dad, your godfather. It's like this revolution, like you said. We're normalizing coming back to ancient wisdom, earth-based traditions that connect us and that, in my opinion, are going to heal the world, or at least get on our way to heal. Thank you so much for joining us, and everybody who's on here who's bilingual or knows people that speak Spanish. Hopefully So-chil will be back and we'll run this again, or similar, because it always flows different in Espanol.
Sí. Yeah, and I want to just, as we're ending, I just want to remind everyone that we have so much information. We're at a time where there's so much information, right? Like you can go and there'll be like 1,000, 1,000,000 different podcasts that you can listen to. The internet, you have access to everything. So information is not necessarily like what's going to heal you. If you're searching for healing, what's going to heal you is actually your connection to your spirit, your connection to the earth. And so I'm really grateful that you're putting out this content. And so please support Gris and allowing her to spread this information that is actually about connection, because that's what we're all doing here, right? Like, I'm not just talking in this podcast because here you go, more information for you. I'm saying, like, here you go. Let's remember to connect once again.
Right. And, the connection, I always talk about how this connection, people might say, like, what do you mean by connection? Well, connection to the body, right? Connection to the body, yes, to the earth, barefoot on the sand, barefoot on the grass, outside in nature, but to the body is through breath, through movement, yoga, dance, whatever you want to do it. But I also believe, and tell me if I'm right, that the mushrooms connect you to the body, right? It's through the body that you get this information, that you release these old memories that are stuck in there, that you have these sensations of, ecstasy, sorrow, grief. And so, I don't know, that's just the way that's one of the things that came up when you mentioned that, like connecting into our conduit of life that we have right now, which is the body.
Yeah. Well, the most important thing to reconsider, I would say, is that a lot of spiritual traditions, we just what happens is that, for example, with Eastern traditions that are traditions of meditation, and they're all about, like, you need to like be beyond the body, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe that that's what
Transcend.
you transcend the body. I don't believe that these traditions only spoke about that. I've been to India, and I realized when I was there that a lot of the information that we get about these traditions is kind of like handpicked. Like, we're gonna learn this part of it, and this part of it tells you to transcend the body. And so earth-based traditions are like, remembering that we are here and this body is sacred. And so
Oh,
the spirit lives here in the body. And so we must honor the body just as much as we honor the spirit. Right.
that's right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. I'm going to put all of Xochitl's information on there about her retreats, and you can follow her on Instagram. I'll tag it all up. Thank you for listening, for sharing this podcast, and for your time here. We'll see you guys next time on Tales of Recovery. Once again, this episode is sponsored by Aquavi, which is alkaline pH, super good, nutritious water that is now available here in San Diego. And I will also put the link on here so that you guys can order your water delivered to your home in all areas in San Diego. And you can go on their webpage and check them out. Pretty soon they'll also be having the agua con clorofila, which is another great thing to honor your body, like Xochitl and I said. Take care of your body and take care of yourselves. We'll see you guys next time.